Hi, my name's Connie Bailey. I'm with the Phoebe Project, and we are very excited to have Kevin Hildebrand, who is a youth drop-in center leader. He's worked with the youth for 26 years in both youth groups and in the local drop-in center. And I tell you, he has a lot of experience when it comes to working with youth. So we're excited to hear what he has to say about unconditional love. How do we help our youth get unstuck? They are living in a crazy time. It seems to be hard for everybody, but the youth especially, they're dealing with a lot of stuff. So how can we help them at the church, in our schools, and our families? Kevin's going to help us out with that. Make sure you follow us on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Kevin, welcome to the podcast. I really think you have a lot of wisdom. What I probably appreciate about you the most is that when you make a mistake, you get over it because you understand God's grace.
Mm-hmm.
And when other people make mistakes, you get over it because you understand God's grace.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's a big part, right? Like, I think once you get comfortable with grace for yourself, then maybe it's easier to have grace for other people.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, right? Like, if you're really gracious with other people, why can't you be it for yourself?
Yeah, exactly.
I was working with kids that most of society would have said are garbage and marginalized and broken and non-Christian and less than.
Right.
That was the main part of my world, right? From 8 till 5. And then from like 7 till 10:30, when I'm in the church and I'm working with these pretty and perfect and well put together kids.
Right.
My eyes were opened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we'd be meeting and I'd be hanging out with the kids, and all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, no way. I could see stuff in those kids, subconsciously hidden, just little things they would say, or people would say something, and they'd just drop their head a little bit, or their eyes, and it would be like, that's what I see every day with my kids at the bunker, but they're not hiding it as much because they know they're in their brokenness, and they know that society sees them as broken and messed up and unworthy, so they don't have to hide their shame or their guilt.
Mm-hmm.
But these kids in these church youth groups, they were hiding so much stuff. And so a lot of times I'd go up and I'm like, hey, how are you doing? Good. Okay, but like, really, like, how are you feeling? Good. Right? Like, right away they can't make eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, you know what? That's fine. I'm not going to push. I'm not going to pressure you. It's just God is letting me know that there is something. And if you need somebody to talk to, you should talk to somebody about it. It doesn't have to be me. I'm just going to encourage you to talk to somebody about it.
Right.
And so many times the response was, I can't. Well, why not? Well, if my parents knew what I have done, what I was into, what I was thinking, what I was feeling, they'd kick me out.
Mm-hmm.
If the people in my church found out what I was doing, what I was thinking, feeling, questioning, my parents wouldn't be able to be ushers anymore.
Mm-hmm.
My parents couldn't be deacons. So I have to keep all this stuff hidden, because if anybody finds out who I really am, what I'm really struggling with, and I'm like, then what? You'll be a bunker kid? Yeah. Well, you know what? That's maybe not so bad, because we'll love you. We care for you. Not saying that the people in this youth group wouldn't love or care for you, because I think you're underestimating the power of love and grace.
Right.
And I would hope that in this as a church, in this as a youth group, that those are just lies that Satan is putting into your head,
Mm-hmm.
and that they aren't real, right? That if you would tell your parents what you've done or all the things that you're struggling with, that they would have a hard time with it.
Right.
But that they would still love you through it, and that they would still care for you, and that they wouldn't cast you aside.
Right.
And I would love to think that the people in this church, instead of your parents can no longer be ushers. It's like, hey, you know what? Now we've got your parents who are struggling with this through you or whatever, and that they would gather around you as a family and that they would love and support and care and pray for you even harder than they were before.
Right. So with your 26, give or take, years of experience with youth,
Hmm.
what advice? I'm going to ask you for advice for 3 categories. Do you have experience? That's worth something.
I suck at advice though, but
Well,
I can give you maybe my perspective.
okay, we'll ask for your perspective.
Yes, okay.
For the youth who have secrets and they don't know what to do with it.
Hmm.
For the parents, how do you become more approachable? For the churches, what do the churches need to do to save these kids?
Okay, so you see, it comes back. It has to start with whoever it is, and it's not just youth, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
adults in the church.
True, true.
We have to come to the point of believing in the people around us, believing that the people around us love us and care for us. We have to have that first, right? And sure, the reality is maybe you don't have people that love and care for you in your life. Genuinely, you really don't, because there are people like that that exist.
Yeah.
Overall, though, I think the vast majority, they do. Parents love their kids. That's 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 not even just a God thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, I've never given birth. I've been part
True.
of the process. You know, like I can't imagine someone as a woman carrying a child for 9 months and then giving birth to them and nurturing them. That now when they're 15 and they say, "Mom, I don't know that I'm interested in boys." That the mom would be like, "Then get out of my house. You are nothing to me."
Yeah.
I sure I imagine it can happen, but deep down, when the parent would come to the realization that no, that is still my child. I don't know. We have to believe that we are worth loving, right? Then it
Right.
comes back to that whole thing again of we have to have grace in ourselves. We have to love ourselves.
Yeah.
And maybe we as a Christian society need to do a better job of letting people know that we can love unconditionally.
Yeah.
We can. We don't often show it, and there I'm making a huge generalization. We There are a lot of people that genuinely show unconditional love all the time. But we as a Christian society, we as humanity really need to start showing love, right? Like
Yeah.
and it's horrible because we have so many preconceived notions and perceptions and judgments and prejudices
Yeah.
that we've just been conditioned, right? Like it's like you go to Winnipeg and I say, "Hey, I'm going to this place," and they're like, "Whoa, that's in the North End." Yeah, and that's where the bad people are,
that that's where my husband grew up.
right? There's good people.
There are good
They
people everywhere.
and they why are they good people? Because they have been created by the same God who created us.
Yeah.
But we see them as being less than us, and then they begin to feel like they are less than us. And so, okay, going back to your original thing,
Yeah.
what can we do better? I think it comes down to we need to be better at being comfortable showing grace and love.
I love that because it's not just about showing grace and love, it's about being comfortable showing grace and love. We have to get to the point where we're comfortable showing grace and love.
Uh-huh.
Because what that might look, that might be, honestly, it might be, you might be judged for doing that. Or
Mm-hmm.
you have to really not care what others think if you're going to be comfortable showing grace and love to every
Yeah.
creation of God's.
Like, have you ever randomly hugged a homeless person on the street?
No.
No. It's uncomfortable.
But I should.
We should. But no, we see a homeless person on the street and oh, I've got, I've got something to look at on my phone for the 3 seconds it takes me to walk past this person.
Or let me buy you a coffee or, whatever.
Even that.
But yeah, you're making me think deeply. It's good. Hopefully you're making other people think deeply.
And it's, yeah, because once you start thinking deeply, that's where God speaks.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre, right? Like, how did we get to the point that we have to stop, intentionally take time to think deeply about what our Father is saying to us?
Yeah.
Right? Like, but then I read about how the disciples and Jesus interacted, and I'm like, okay, these guys walked with Jesus every single day, all the time, and they still missed the point.
Yeah,
So I can't be so hard on ourselves saying that, we're horrible. We've devolved to this point where we miss the point.
But we definitely have some work to do as Christian society.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that you mentioned earlier that the disciples were teenagers. And here we are, middle of our lives, I'm going to say, probably as mature as the disciples who were teenagers. Like, we have the same struggles they had.
And a lot of times we're closer to the Pharisees than we are to the disciples.
Very true.
What can we do better? That, I think, very much has to be between us and God, right? Because what God asks me will be very different than what he asks you.
Yeah.
Because you were created differently. You have different skills, passions.
Yeah.
Going back to when I was in church youth groups, right? And I was a leader there. And I was going to change the world, right? I was going to become a youth pastor, and I was going to lead all these kids to Christ, and I was going to change the world, right? Not me. That's not who God created me to be.
Right.
And it bugged me. Where it's like I would sit there and I'd be like, really, God? Like, I've been working with young people for 16 years in like churches and here at the bunker. And you know how many kids I've led to Christ in that amount of time? Like, in 16 years, like the hundreds of kids that I interacted with. And you know how many I led to Christ? None.
Okay.
Absolutely none. And I'm like, I suck at this.
Right.
Like, why am I doing this if I'm not leading anyone to Christ? And it was seriously starting to get in my head, and it was seriously starting to bother me and get me down. And then, I had to have a serious sit down with God. And he's like, you talk about dreams, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, he gave me a dream. And in the dream, he was talking about how, look, like, this is like raising a crop. That's why he says, I often talk about reaping and harvesting and all of that stuff, right? In terms of Christianity and all of that. But he says, how did we get to that point, right? Like, yes, you're harvesting the wheat, you're harvesting these Christian souls, but how did we get to that point? It's like, think about when your ancestors moved to Canada. This was a prairie. It was covered in rocks, stones, trees, and swamp. People had to come in, they had to move the trees, they had to move the stones, they had to break the ground, then somebody had to come and cultivate it up further and make it better, and then somebody came and they had to plant the seed, and then somebody had to come and take out weeds or whatever it is, and then there had to be water, and then finally somebody gets to harvest. And he says, you know what? Somebody has to be the plow,
right? And
somebody's going to be the harvester. And
there's different jobs for different people.
Yep, I'm a plow. I'm like, he says, like, that's, you will be there to break ground or take down trees or move rocks. Right. And yes, somebody down the road years later, they're going to be the ones that, lead that person to Christ. But it's all the people before that have just as much significance in that person's story.
I'm so grateful that Kevin joined us today. He has so much wisdom to offer. Make sure you reach out to him if you have any questions, and he would be more than happy to help. The Phoebe Project is all about connecting people, helping people find healing, helping people get unstuck, and you can find out more at thephoebeproject.com. Also, you can subscribe to Spotify and YouTube and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. I'm Connie Bailey with the Phoebe Project, and we hope to see you next time.